Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Replay Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. In the last part we finally reached Dracula's castle, and this song sounds familiar. That's right, for stage 8 they actually remixed Vampire Killer under the pseudonym Deja Vu, and this is my absolute favorite song in the game. It's not my favorite mix of Vampire Killer, but it's damn good. Also, those statues in the background in the American version had more robes added because you gotta protect the children from the boobies. Stage 8 through 10, which is going to be the rest of the part, we're beating the game by the end of the part, by the way, can potentially be the hardest stages in the game. Well, not even potentially, they are, even normally. But if you're playing the American version, it's here where the difficulty spikes really tend to come in, because there's new enemies added in really annoying positions. The damage buffs get ridiculous here, because Medusa heads in particular become really annoying. And in some cases, checkpoints were changed, making it just really hellish. If you're playing the Japanese version like I am, just fan translated, you don't have as much to fear, but oh boy. Oh boy. Now, one thing I should mention actually on the topic of the damage buff, I was incorrect about something with that. And this is only due to me not being aware of it, honestly. Because I was partially correct about how it works, but not entirely. You see, here in the Japanese version, every enemy has their own damage value that never increases or decreases depending on where you are in the game. Meaning, smaller enemies are usually going to hit you for less, bigger enemies probably going to hit you for more. In the American version, that was changed so that every enemy did the exact same amount of damage, just the fact that that damage got buffed later in the game. Which, on paper, isn't a horrible idea, but then you realize that you have Medusa heads dealing like a third of your health. And then you're like, okay, never mind. That's the main reason I generally play the Japanese version, because it's a lot more fair in that regard, because it makes sense I would take more damage from, say, an Axe Knight as opposed to a Slime. Now, one thing I should go over that is already out by the time this gets uploaded without a doubt, is that there is a Castlevania animation on Netflix. And we've only seen the initial trailer so far in terms of where I am in 2017. But by the looks, it's going to be an adaptation of Castlevania 3 here. And I think that's actually a really good idea for a TV series, because it has the most characters to work with between Grant, Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard all working together, and God knows who else they're going to bring in from the other games as well. For all we know, they might actually give us Dracula's backstory. Either way, hold forward here and only use a sub-weapon to kill that guy. The rest of these probably can either hold hearts or sub-weapons that I don't want, because I want the electric orbs for the upcoming boss fights. Which, if I'm playing with anyone else, is probably my least favorite boss fight. With Sypha, not so much. It's Death again! And Death likes throwing sickles at us. That's his main attack, as usual. Electric orbs, best way to go about damaging him, because they'll home into him. However, the big issue with using them in this fight at the same time is that they'll also home in onto his sickles. Phase 2, thankfully, is much easier with that, because it only has him to phase onto. And Death in Phase 2 can be a bit tricky. He only fires one sickle every once in a while, but the big hitbox is his head himself. He constantly goes in that spiral formation from left to right, wrapping around the screen, obviously. And if you need to jump over him using the blocks on the stage to actually, jump over him and not get killed by that. And that jump can be very tricky. More often than not, I can usually just take a hit from him just to tank through it because I have more health, but not so much there. And now it's time for Stage 9, which is another great song, actually. Akimajo Densetsu soundtrack is just great. Castlevania 3 on the NES? Not bad. But man, those extra sound channels work some brilliant work. Mind you, I've mentioned it before, but it really also depends on who's using the hardware, because I think his name's like Tim Follin, the guy who did the Silver Surfer soundtrack. That was an NES sound chip, and it sounds amazing. I think he also did Solstice? And I think Pictionary. That sounds about right. Also, this totally is an annoying way to start a stage. Fleamen everywhere. It's actually not if you use the electric balls. The electric balls really just break this game. Which, mind you, every game, well, not every game, at least 80% of games have that one thing that's kind of busted in general, because it's either just not worth balancing or they didn't think about it too hard. I suppose even 80% is probably a bit too much. I'd probably say 60, actually. And I usually love abusing that one thing. But there are times where it's a bit even too ridiculous for me, like, Let's see, I always use the pause trick in Mega Man 1. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head for some reason. That's weird. Let's look across at my game collection. Chicago typewriter in Resident Evil 4 once you can get it. That's great. Either way, let's get back to the game. This is a area that can, once again, similarly to another area we saw similar to this early on, that can be annoying if you're just hesitating, but if you're holding up for the most part, you can get through fairly unscathed, except for these demon knights. Have I mentioned I hate those enemies yet? Because I think I have, and needs repeating. I hate these enemies. Thankfully, I'm skirting past a lot of them. As Grant, these stages aren't too bad as well. The worst person for these stages, without a doubt, is Alucard, because while Grant has the mobility pro to him, and Sypha has the attack, in these stages, Alucard doesn't really have a plus, aside from skipping minor platforming sections that Grant can as well. Though thinking about it now, actually, it is kind of interesting how they kind of made an in-betweener, because Sypha's all attacks, Grant's all mobility, but Alucard they tried to do the best of both with, because his Balls of Destruction can hurt when up close, and he obviously has his Bat form for mobility's sake, which is an interesting idea. I just wish they had done better with it. Also, time for another vertically scrolling sequence. Yet again, everything below us is now instant death. Do not go down there. And stay, if not around the top third of the screen, the middle quarter, or around the middle, rather. Because there are times, like we're about to see right now, or not, well, that was bad, where enemies will spawn right above you even though you're in the right area. Like that. There we go. So taking your time is recommended. It's during the vertical scrolling sections where you're heading towards the bottom of the screen where you want to stay towards the top, because generally speaking, enemies who hit that black bar where our HUD is disappear and are no longer considered part of the programming. You can actually use that to your advantage to eliminate some slowdown in the next stage with some Medusa heads. Yeah, I knew you were there, you blue spark-looking guy from Zelda 1. Honestly, it's sections like these, though, where you really just get hammered into how many stairs there are in this game. Also, there's a door here to the left. I've heard there's one to the right, but I've checked and there's nothing. However, one thing I do know for a fact is that there is meat in that wall below me. I forget if I get it, though. Yes, I do. I think this is the last wall meat in the game, if not second to last. I don't think there's any in the final stage. And hey, look, it's the only other area where Sypha's ice ability really comes in handy, because we got more mermen. This area is a lot more annoying, though, because you actually have to fight the current actively this time. And there's a lot more crows this time around. No, don't want that. You actually still want to keep the electric orbs on you for actually the rest of the game, now that I'm thinking about it. Because every other boss in the game has some workaround with this electric orbs that just makes it really easy. Also, a detail I like in terms of the boss fights for these last three stages is that, if I recall, they are in the exact same order as the final three bosses of Castlevania 1. I like details like that. I actually remember I had one playthrough of Symphony of the Night where I tried to go after the, what are they called? The reversed castle, there we go. The reversed castle bosses in the order of the bosses from Castlevania 1, which was mildly successful, I think. Boss of Stage 9 is the Doppelganger once again, and there are a few ways you could go about this. The main thing you want to do is have it be Sypha, because then it'll try to walk beneath you to try and hit you with the normal rod, in which case you can just electric orbit to death. As Trevor, it can get up here, and that can be tedious. Another way to go about fighting that thing, though, at least if you don't have the electric orbs, is to constantly press the select button to turn into Sypha as Trevor, then turn back immediately, because then it'll do its reforming animation where you can get a cheap hit on it. As anyone else but Sypha, though, that fight is annoying. Either way, time for the final stage. And it's actually fairly short, at least in terms of getting to the boss fight. There's only like 4 or 5 screens total here. However, the second one immediately is going to be a vertical scrolling section, so yay. Now it's here where I should go over the fact of the endings. I'm showing all 4 endings. I know I mentioned this before, but I'm showing all 4 endings the game has to offer. The way you get them depends on how you beat the final boss. Entirely, actually, it's based on who you have with you. If you have Trevor alone, that's an ending. If you have Alucard, that's an ending. If you have Grant, that's an ending. If you have Sypha, that's an ending. Sypha's, I believe, is the most believed to be canon, even though I believe in canon, Trevor fought alongside all 3 of them at the same time. Just the fact, gameplay can't have all 4. And similarly to some of the alternate cutscenes in X6, I'm going to apologize ahead of time for some quality degradation with them, because I had someone else record those cutscenes for me once again. And they're all, I believe, at least I think he used the NES version. It looks like he used the NES version based off the dialogue. And the main reason for that is I just don't feel like replaying these last few stages again. I had to basically do 3 full playthroughs of this game as it was, but I never went for the final boss due to some of them. Plus, I don't think I can ever beat this game with Trevor alone. That's really hard to do for me. I can do a lot of things in games, but beat this game with Trevor alone, probably not one of them. And no, it's not even going to be a bucket list thing for me. Bucket list thing for me is probably something like, let's look across at my game collection. Actually obtaining a Master Materia in 7 through legit means. Okay, yeah, there we go. And by legit means, I mean, like, not through fighting the weapons. I mean, like, mastering every single materia of a single class. Actually, what would be the easiest to do that with? Probably no, summons take a while. Probably magic, honestly. Actually, ability wouldn't take too long, I think. Also, this is a screen I was talking about earlier. This screen isn't too hard, just have to time your jumps carefully. The American version realized that, so they added in bats, which makes this a lot more annoying than it should be. Also, if I recall, we're coming up on the usual grand staircase to Dracula. And another important change from to the American version is, for some bizarre reason, they decided to make this not a checkpoint. Here in the Japanese version, this is a checkpoint. If you game over on Dracula, you come back here. If you game over on Dracula in the American version, by the way, hi Moon holding a gun, you are sent all the way back to the start of the stage, which is annoying. Also, you can do the exact same thing one you did in Castlevania 1 here. Go down, back up, grab the hearts again. But yeah, that's one of the other reasons I decided to play the Japanese version of the American in both LPs, because this fight was made unnecessarily long due to that. Either way, Dracula, his first phase isn't too bad. He likes to summon two smaller fire pillars in a certain distance within you, from 2 to 5 pillar blocks distance, then make a third one come from under you. Blue orbs takes care of it. Phase 2, whatever this is, just drops goop on you, and I think fires a projectile at you directly every now and then, but with blue orbs, once again, kinda gets massacred. Actually, it's kinda gruesome, too. And the third phase, which we're going to be seeing in a moment, because he actually has 3 phases this time around, which looks like Pazuzu for some reason, actually has another change to it from the American version. In the American version, he fires his lasers a lot more quickly, and by quickly I mean more often, and they're also twice as long, so watch out for that. With the blue orbs and Sypha, nothing really to fear in this final boss. With Grant, it can be kind of annoying, at least in the first phase. Actually, no, Grant's not too bad in the first and third phase. The second phase is where it's hard there. Alucard basically has trouble with everything that's not the second phase. Trevor has an okay time with all of them. Overall, not a very hard final boss. With the right character, of course. Also, do not fall into the pits where those blocks came from, because you will die. I've done it 3 times. But with the floor back down, our red orb should drop. There we are. And ladies and gentlemen, that's game. Let's watch all the endings. I'm going in order from Trevor all the way to Sypha, with Sypha being the last one because be the person to beat the game with. Trevor made many sacrifices. The long fight is over. Dracula is dead, and all the other spirits are asleep. In the shadows, a person watches the castle fall. Trevor must go for now, but he hopes someday he will get the respect that he deserves. After this fight, the Belmont name shall be honored by all people. Trevor made many sacrifices. The long fight is over. Dracula is dead, and all the other spirits are asleep. Both feel their friendship is stronger since they work together to rid Wallachia City of evil. Grant will start to rebuild the destroyed areas of the city. After this fight, the Belmont name shall be honored by all people. Trevor made many sacrifices. The long fight is over. Dracula is dead, and all other spirits are asleep. The battle was won by Trevor and Alucard, but Alucard feels guilty because he killed his real father. Trevor realizes this as he stands there thinking about Alucard. After this fight, the Belmont name shall be honored by all people. Come see Alucard again when he returns in Symphony of the Night, where he's a lot better, seriously. After such a great sacrifice, the battle was won. Dracula defeated, the evil called out to the land vanished. Because of her calling, Sypha hid her true form, but after meeting Trevor, she felt peace inside, and so did he. They had fallen in love. And so the Belmont name became legend. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's Castlevania 3 finally done in a proper fashion for me. And how is it? It's okay. Honestly, due to the difficulty spike, especially for newcomers, I think this is probably my least favorite out of the original classic trio, though. Because I have a lot of fun with Castlevania 1. I go back to it at least twice a year. And while I think, as a game on its own, Simon's Quest is the inferior of the three, I think its ambition made it much more memorable in my eyes, whereas Castlevania 3 just gets a bit too carried away with its own difficulties, if that makes sense. Because they try to do Castlevania 1 but expanded, and I can give them credit for that, but it just doesn't feel as if it reaches its goal quite as well. Castlevania 4 is a much better game due to that in my eyes, because they expanded on the formula in a much clearer way, if that makes grammatical sense. However, I do still think it is a worthwhile play, at least once if you're into this series. If you want to play it, it's on the Famicom, the NES, the Wii Virtual Console, Wii U Virtual Console, I think the 3DS Virtual Console as well. So there's a good amount of ways you can play this. I think there's also some like mobile re-release in Japan or something, I don't know. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.